Hello, I am BlizzTank, and we are going to be ranking every Team Fortress 2's class to be another class. Ultimately, it's a pretty simple equation to lab out for each class. As an example, you have the Scout. What about the Scout? Well, you see here, he has a scatter gun. 6 shots. Shotgun, basically. Every other class can have a shotgun, basically. What does it mean? I don't know. Let's find out. He has movement speed. You know what? Other classes can have faster movement speed. Maybe other classes can be better than the Scout if they have good movement speed and a shotgun of sorts. Maybe they just need some sort of lightning fast weapon that acts like a hit scan to mimic Scout's precision. Maybe they also need jumping potential, realize that. These are the questions we must ask and answer, and that I will ask and answer for the sake of everybody. Most of all myself, and my own sanity, for I am losing it at a rapid pace, if you could not tell. That being said, you must also analyze a third and potentially fourth factor for most classes. For Scout, this would be his ability to double jump. But I hear you ask, fuck. What's so unique about a double jump? Well, it's a jump, but twice! But what if instead of having a singular double jump, you could have something more like 4 jumps that act as double jumps? What's the point of Scout then, huh? I don't know. Using these established metrics for Scout, we will now rank Scout's ability to be a Scout. To start off with, he is a scattergun. We have already discussed this. We have analyzed this. His scattergun is indeed a scattergun that fulfills the purpose of a scattergun. I do not have much else to say here. Now let's move on to, his double jump. You know, I think having the ability to just double jump at will is, pretty unfair. Maybe you have a code of honor and ethics, and maybe you don't like exploiting that unfair advantage over other classes. Maybe you're a class purist, and you just want to have it be playing like an older game, you know, where everybody is on a similar footing and all that's different are the weapons. You know, if that's the case, this is probably the wrong game for you, but I can't ignore your plight, so I will take this into consideration. Then we have his mobility. There are other classes that are better at being mobile than the Scout, so I think that's going to be pretty weak for him. I'm going to go ahead and give his scattergun a 10 out of 10 on the scattergun metric. I'm going to give his double jump... I'd have to go with a 6 out of 10. He has a certain bit of a leg up over other classes that lack mobility options, but against classes with mobility options, there's just no comparison, you know? I refuse to elaborate further on that right now. I will do so later. So, we have to move on to the movement speed now. Admittedly, there's only a few classes that can match Scout's movement speed with their own mobility options, but let's be real here, the classes that are able to do that are able to way overshine Scout's movement speed, and they don't have that movement speed inherently, so it's a higher skill requiring option, really sets apart the good players from the bad players on the class. Going back to the whole class pierce thing, you know, it's like, maybe it's a good thing that it takes skill to be able to be mobile as a class. Maybe you shouldn't just have an inherent leg up there, huh? I think this is a big downside that Scout mains have going for him. You can't double jump away from all your life problems, and you can't always just be running, you know? Sometimes you just have to take a leap, you have to take the initiative, you have to be a better person. But you see Scouts, they have a static mindset, they always try and take everything at the same pace, and ultimately, I think it betrays them as people. I think it weakens them, and I think on an abstract level, this is why that Scout is not the best Scout. It represents a flawed mindset that cannot allow you to play at your true potential as a Scout. So, I unfortunately cannot give Scouts that high of a ranking overall. I'm giving their jumps a 7... I'm giving their movement speed, rather, a 7 out of 10. Why? For points established already. Overall, I think this results in Scout being able to perform at a Scout level solid... I feel like its estimate adds up to around an 8 out of 10. I think that's a fair ranking. You know, it's kind of hard to match up to the original class, admittedly, as a class, but there still are better options, and allow me to show you why. So the next class we have to analyze as a scout is going to be the soldier. So I've concocted the perfect soldier loadout to be able to be a scout. We have the rocket jumper here. This baby allows you to have 4 double jumps, and that is 3 times the double jumps you have on the scout. That is pretty powerful right there. You have a shotgun. It's like a scatter gun, but for people who are not as skinny as the scout, unfortunately. The disciplinary action, that gives you movement speed. I think this is a pretty airtight loadout for the task at hand. So as you can see here, I've used my double jumps to skillfully land on and kill this heavy. Already, this is a pretty potent demonstration of the potential of this loadout set. You're gonna have to forgive my game lagging here, I'm actually processing the first part of this as we speak. So you can see here, despite my bad aim, I'm still able to be a better scout than I would be as scout. I have a higher mobility potential and higher double jumps. Clearly, this is just the better option. It's a more honorable way to play scout, and I think it's representative of a healthier mental state. Moving on to the specifics of this set. I'm gonna give the rocket jumper a 15 out of 10 on the scout chart for double jumps. I think the reasoning is pretty airtight there. Just look at what you can do here, right? Look at this sheer potential. Bing bong boom. Look at all that mobility. You have so much air control, so much mobility, and it just takes a little tiny bit of mechanical skill compared to just pressing double jump space once to double jump rather. And you can see I have a lot higher movement speed than a scout if you want to be technical about it. So I think that's also a pretty important aspect to think about here. And I think that's just gonna end up resulting in, I'd say, a 10 out of 10 for mobility. You have just the right movement speed to do whatever you need to do. And his shotgun, well, it's like scouts, but for more intellectual people, you know? So I'm gonna have to give that one at least an 11 out of 10. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair reasoning. I think I'm being pretty reserved in my estimations here. I don't think I'm being unfair at all. If anything, I'm being a little too easy on scout for this. Like, there really just is a better option. I'm sorry, Scoutians. You should switch. Overall, I think this gives Soldier a 13 out of 10 score as a scout. Pretty good. I will admit, I had a lapse in my judgment. I forgot to account for the fact that Soldier can do Scout's job but better with an additional 75 HP off the back of it. This can only bring his ranking up. This is more sustainability. I can't keep a straight face with this, fuck. And, it boosts his score up by another point. Let's, leave it at a 14, call it that. And I think this is a pretty definitive conclusion here. So I believe this is the best loadout set the Pyre can have to compare to Scout. This just allows the Pyre to, rotate between his ability to deal damage with his shotgun, which, spoiler alert, is going to be the same ranking as the scattergun and the soldier shotgun. And in addition to this, the Pyro, or rather the Scout, if you want to be technical now, has the ability to reflect to serve damage. So now you have this crazy mobility option that actually takes a lot of skill. You know, it's not like Soldier or Scout where you just look at a wall or like spam a button to move. You see there, you get sent flying a little bit. And you can also shove people away, just like the shortstop. In addition, you have a bit of a higher health pool, and you have the ability to just reflect projectiles, which is pretty important, pretty vital. It just allows you to kill your perfect counter as a scout normally, the soldier. So I think there's a pretty fair case to be made here, and I'm going to get into the rankings of the class class now. So the shotgun, of course, is a 10 out of 10 on the shotgun metric. I'd say maybe even 11 or a 12, just due to how it's able to be switched to faster. But, I don't want to hand them out too hectically here, so I'll just leave it at an 11. I'd give the flamethrower, the degreaser here, probably just a straight up 10 out of 10, It allows you to do everything you need to do. It's not too fancy though, and it does require some skill to use. So while it's more honorable as a method of movement technique, unfortunately I am going to have to deduct points just due to the lessened consistency and viability of it. For the optimal scout pyro experience though, and I am concluding this as I go, I think you should unbind your stock flamethrowers mouse 1. Or rather, just not use mouse 1 in the first place here. I guess society hasn't advanced far enough to be able to do that. And you see, I'm a bit of a noob on Scout, so I'm not able to truly realize the potential of the air blast. You see, I still feel the inclination to, as a pyro main, hold mouse 2 with my flamethrower. Mouse 1, rather. So, I can't really use this set to its full potential. I think you can, though. So the double jumps, unfortunately I'm going to have to dock pretty heavily from the class. I'm going to leave it at probably a 2 out of 10. Very rarely are you going to be in a position where you can actually reflect jump with that much health or that consistently. Leaves you a bit scuffed with the mobility option there. Movement speed though, I'm going to have to give a solid 5 out of 10. You're not the fastest class. No, I'll be fair, I'll bump it up to a 6. You're not going to be that fast, right? But as pyro, you're going to find yourself in a lot of situations where you're kind of surfing damage away, especially with the power jack and with the added ability to air blast. So, it could definitely be worse. But it's just not playing to the strengths of the class unless you're god at a pyro scout. I think overall that leaves it with, I'm gonna have to give the Pyro Scout as a whole a 6 out of 10. Unfortunately, it's just not that good in execution. Leaves a lot of room to be desired. This is the loadout I've concocted for the Demo and Scout. As you can see here, we have the Leaf's Cannon, and this is basically your scatter gun here. What you do is you go right up next to a target, and you just release it with barely any time left, just like this. And it's kind of like a shotgun, It has some ability to hit multiple targets, and you're going to be using it in close quarters only. The Tide Turner, it gives you the max mobility. It allows you to just run around like crazy, and you match the movement speed of the Scout, Islander here, you just have the ability to gain more HP and gain more health. It's a win-win, and all that's happening, you're resistant to some of Scout's greatest counters. You're able to counter both Soldier and Pyro, and Demo a bit, all at the same time. So really, I think this leaves you with one of the strongest possible Scout sets without having to go through the pain and anguish of subjecting yourself to playing Scout. Moving on, we are going to review each individual metric of the class. Or perhaps not, as this is the tf2 bot experience now. Now that I have escaped from the bot plague that oh so ruins this game, we are going to be reviewing the gameplay of this class, and its ability to fulfill the roles of the Scout. So you can see there, that's actually some pretty good movement technique. You could just go flying with your cannon. Well, your scattergun rather. It's basically like a double jump, You just go flying around, you can curve around it. Here you can see some pretty skilled scattergun usage. You see that knockback, it's just like the force of nature. Unfortunately, you lack sustained close combat capabilities, so it is a little bit weaker than Scout in that regard. You kind of just fire all your scattergun shots, and then you're in for a little bit of trouble. That being said, once you get the basics down and you start realizing your movement potential, I think you're a really strong contender for the Scout spot. Maybe you could even steal a Highlander Scout spot with this set. And I think that's really the greatest issue that something like Highlander experiences. People are too close-minded. They don't want to accept these thrilling and new metagames that could totally redefine the concept of Highlander. Moving on, let's rank the specifics here. So, double jump. Solid 9 out of 10. You only have one double jump, but from that double jump you're able to experience a lot of momentum, just like this. You can't tell me that Scout can do that with his double jump. It is on a bit of a cooldown, but you know, it's like, that's just the price you pay for greater air potential mobility. You see the great use of this scattergun here. You see the great damage you can deal to singular targets. You can see a bit of scaling here potentially. Oh, nope, he's playing Scout as well. You can see it. This is just how smart Scout players have become. They've realized that the best way to play Scout is by not playing Scout. And really, that's an interesting philosophical quandary that we find ourselves with. Scattergun, I think I'll give a solid... I think I'll give a 5 out of 10 to it. It really just depends. If you're the best Scout in the game, you're gonna find that you have the highest potential with the loose cannon as your scattergun. There's just no comparison there. But the average player, you know, the type of player like me, who just doesn't understand the intricacies at play as well as they could, that it's just gonna be a 5 out of 10. You know, it's middle of the road. There's gonna be worse than it, but there's gonna be better. And you might just be hampering yourself by doing it. Now, movement speed. 10 out of 10 without a doubt. You just see an unrivaled ability to go around the map. Overall, you get higher movement speed from every Highlander attack. So, you know, it's like pretty effective. It allows you to become Scout-like eventually. Maybe you're just like a melee Scout player, you know? And you're able to mimic that. But then you have like such a higher potential. So I think it's gonna be a case of the highest potential for a Scout, but with the caveat that it takes a while to get to that point. Like, there's an already high floor to get to that ceiling, right? And I think that's pretty solid and justified reasoning there. And I think I'm going to have to leave that with... It's going to have to be a 7 out of 10 for the Demoman. He has a very high potential cap, but a very jarring skill curve to get to that point. So this is the heavy let-out set. I think the Guru is pretty self-explanatory. You move faster, you kind of more like a Scout. The family business, I think this represents the Scout's inability to really damage targets that far from a range, and a lot of the time you're kind of moving around trying to find an optimal range for a Scout, you know? You're not always necessarily getting right up into people's faces, so I think just having a higher damage penalty is fair. And then Natasha, well, you see, the issue with Heavy here is that he's a bit slow, and so making everybody else slower is a great way to equalize the playing field, and it's also really in the spirit of communism, although it is important to note that that somewhat counteracts the notion of capitalism that Scout represents and holds dear to him as an American and Bostonian. You have liberty versus communism here, and it's an interesting political conflict. So you can see here, you have a high mobility cap, you have 300 HP, but you are weaker for a bit, so it's like you're kind of like a Scout when you're initially getting into a fight. Unfortunately, you have next to no double jumping. All you can really do is hope to occasionally surf damage like a sticky or something, which you can kind of do actually with your drastically increased health pool. That being said, your mobility just isn't comparable, but let's think about this, right? You're playing Team Fortress 2, you're going to have a teleporter. If you have your engineer set up like a teleporter near the front lines or the flank, your mobility isn't even that much of an obstacle, and you find yourself in a position where you have more health than a Scout, while being able to do similar things. So, this gives you a max higher potential in a way, depending on how smartly you're able to pick your engagements, but less means to get to that point, if that makes sense. As you can see here, I'm about ready to spread the spirit of communism, make other people move as slow as the heavy Scout here, just equalize things, you know. It's a moral obligation or responsibility let's go ahead and see how effective it is. You see, that scout is moving the same speed as me, so really, you have a great ability to neutralize the scout's mobility and just be a healthier version of the same scout here. You see, another benefit as heavy is that you're going to draw medics to you, whereas as scout, you're not going to be finding as much heals unless it's with competitive players. You know, people just trust the pub heavy over the pub scout all the time. And you can see here I'm utilizing movement technology. I'm able to move super fast, so I'm gonna give heavy. I'm gonna say a 6 out of 10 for the shotgun. You know, it's a bit it has a bit less of a zing than I would like. You can see here another downside of playing this version of Scout is that spies are gonna be drawn to your back like nothing else. Like moths to a light, rather. Now, mobility. Pretty low, honestly, on the mobility list, but you were able to neutralize other scouts' mobilities and have an equal playing field while having more health. So I think that deserves at least some points. And I think I'm gonna give that, I want to say a 6 out of 10. It's like a trade-off, but a beneficial trade-off, right? And then for double jumping, I'm just gonna have to give a heavy a straight up 2 purely because occasionally people will shoot stickies at him. So overall, it's a bit of a weak option, I'm not gonna lie. I'd estimate it to be around, let's see, you can see here the mental effect that this level of scout has on people. But I'm gonna have to estimate it to be, let's call it, a 6? I think it's more of a side grade. So this here is the next class on the list, the Engineer Scout. And what you're going to want to do is have the Widowmaker out. The Widowmaker, it's a very good scatter gun. Basically, as long as you're able to be in close proximity, it goes well above and beyond the Call of Duty of a scatter gun. Next up, you have the Short Circuit over here. I'm kind of getting blasted around by the Sentry Gun. I will demonstrate in further detail, I'll elaborate in a little bit, but next up we have the Eureka effect. It's your main mobility option, it compensates for your lack of movement speed. Look at this, you set up a teleporter behind, boom, you're a scout. That simple. You wanna be like a scout man? Then you just constantly teleport back and forth, you just use all of the teleporter charges, and you act greedily. Unfortunately, a big drawback of the set is that you're unable to use the short circuit regularly. Let's be honest, it'd be pretty unfair if Scout just had the ability to completely nullify projectiles, at least with fire there's some technique involved. Let me just avoid this colony here. Unfortunately, this might not be the best. Oh, there you go, that's your double jump right there. That's a beautiful movement technique that I saw from a video from Anthid recently. And I think that's gonna really round out your loadout here. If you ever need more ammo for your short circuit to right click and jump with, then you just use the Widowmaker, what can I say? So that really rounds out your loadout. So here, I'm gonna stop doing the funny extra rankings now. I'm not gonna go above any 10s. As much as it pains me to do this, I have to be more objective in my analysis here. I simply cannot be providing inaccurate information any longer. It pulls on my heart to do so. I'm sorry, guys. So, I'm gonna give the scatter gun a 10 out of 10 here. I think it's a pretty good scatter gun. I'd say, honestly, it's better than Scout's scatter gun and the regular shotguns. I'd probably bump those down to 9, maybe bump their overall Scout rankings down by 1 for the rest of the classes, and move this up 1. I'm still gonna allow Pyro to Air Blast. I think that's pretty fair, it does provide him movement options. Whereas with Engineer, it's like Air Blast is his ability to short circuit and completely deny projectiles. I think it's unfair, you know, no type of scout should have that power, that would just be evil. The skunks would be going crazy. But anyways, Widowmaker, 10 out of 10. Double jump, I'm gonna give a solid 4 out of 10. You can do it pretty consistently, as long as you're close to people, but that's the main thing. You're not going to be that close to people all the time, and you're going to be putting yourself in a pretty risky position unless you can hit more of your shots. And mobility, I'm gonna go with... I think I'm gonna go with a 4 out of 10 here. So overall, it's a pretty strong scout for direct combat, but you just kind of lack the consistency that you'd be wanting to, ideally speaking, see from a scout. So overall, I'm gonna have to give the engineer... I think I bumped demo up to a 6 out of 10, maybe bump the engineer down to 4. Nah. Just go with a 4 for the engineer by default. You know, it really is shameful. His shotgun, scattergun, is so effective, it can't compete. I'm sorry, guys. I've reevaluated my previous work up until this point, and I have realized, to have better memes, I must be more just with my judgment and reevaluate my scores, so I have done so accordingly. I believe that this is much more fair and well-oriented. So this is the loadout I've crafted for the mout, also known as the Meta Scout. Here, you see, you get extra movement speed. You can latch onto your targets and mirror their jumps, movement speed, and charges. And this is just the Uber Soul is just a faster way to get to having Uber in the first place. Now, you can't actually use Uber. I think that'd be a bit ridiculous. Scouts don't have Ubers. I don't think it's a vital part to the medic or anything. Nope, definitely not. And you can see, maybe I'll go for some Uber Souls the next life. You'll see that, overall, his scattergun, pretty weak. You know, you have to play a melee-oriented scout, but that's an interesting situation to be put into. It's rather unique, I might insist, compared to other classes where you typically have more ranged options to be playing a scout. Now that being said, once you reach your max potential, you're gonna see that you're pretty decently fast, and you can kind of just zoom around. You see I'm playing a scout here, I've been latched onto by another medic. I'm gonna go for some melee plays here. There's just a demo man shooting random stickies. That's pretty scary, that's also pretty scary. Luckily I am a scout here. I can move very fast. I have regenning health, in fact. So it's like, you have a lot more utility as a scout here. Your lifespan's gonna be a lot higher. If you're experiencing issues with like dying or feeding in, this is probably gonna be the loadout for you, you know? You're gonna be able to play it more safely and survive for longer. I've always thought we could use a more melee-oriented scout, you know? Moving on to the rankings. I'm going to have to give his scattergun... I'm gonna go with 3 scatterguns out of 10. I mean, it's pretty interesting to see the increased mobility, but it's only while it's active. It's not that effective at actually dealing damage. You know, Scout's supposed to just be able to shoot people and hit them, and that's not the case here, and I think that's pretty messed up. Movement speed, I'm gonna give probably, let's check here. I think I'll go with a 9 out of 10 probably for movement speed, purely because it's a bit more team reliant. No, actually probably an 8.5, yeah. And then double jumps, I'm gonna go with a 1 out of 10. And here's my reason, right? You can double jump technically, but you're relying on your team in a team-based game. And you're just never going to see that happening, you know, or they're always just going to be launching into the enemies, and Scout doesn't have much survivability. But take a look at this mobility here, you see. It's quite good utility. Apparently Scout learned how to be a doctor. I don't think that's in the official tf2 lore, but you'll see this is a pretty ineffective loadout. I'm gonna have to tank this one's ratings pretty heavily, yeah. Let's go with a 3.2 out of 10. So this is the scout loadout we have to work with here. You see, you have a bow, you hold it all the way, and then you just release it eventually, and you get some arrow spread. I'll go and showcase some of that here. Otherwise, you have the SMG. You just kind of run at people, you know, you try and chip them down, that's kind of scouty. Then you have the pan, basically Scout's just an annoyance, and I think this is going to be pretty effective for annoying people, you know? You just walk up to them, you pan them, eventually they'll try and vote kick you, or just say nasty things to you. It really channels some of the same energy as the Scout. So let's get right into it. His scattergun, it's pretty effective. As you can see there, it has a decent lot of spread as long as you hold it down for too long. Remember, you can't fire until you have spread, otherwise you're just not playing Scout, and that's pretty messed up. You know, you want to actually be trying to play the class you want to play. Don't know why you'd play Sniper otherwise. There you see a pretty big weakness of the Scout scattergun, though. It's very easily reflectable, and I think that's a pretty crippling weakness. That being said, it has a lot of potential, though, as a primary weapon option. Has a lot of potential damage. You can see here, you can track like a Scout with your pistol. It's pretty effective. I don't think that's a main metric to go by, though. That's more of a secondary sort of thing. Your movement speed is pretty bad. You don't really have any movement options, so I'm gonna have to give that a pretty low score. Let's see. Probably... let's go with... I'm gonna go with a 2 out of 10. You're not gonna be the slowest class necessarily, it's not like you're a heavy, but you have no real movement options, no tech to go with. Yeah. This leaves your double jump ability. I'm gonna give it a 1 out of 10. So overall, we have a very weak contender here. I would not recommend this. As much as it's interesting to try and be a Scout as a Sniper, it's just not the class for you. You're going from Call of Duty to Battlefield. They're not compatible genres, and you're just going to find yourself being depressed at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no other way to put it. It does have pretty good spread on the primary weapon. That's his only saving grace. It really is just like a super precise sort of long-range scattergun, and that alone is actually pretty overpowered. So I'm probably gonna buff his scattergun up to like an 8 out of 10. No, I'll go with a 6.5, yeah. And that will leave his overall ranking at approximately a... I'm going to have to go with a 2.4 out of 10. I think it really just comes down to a conflict in school of ideologies, much like the heavy versus the Scout, but it's taken to an absolute extreme here. It's like anarcho-capitalism versus anarcho-primitivism. You know, it's just... there's no existing, there's no cool, funny, hybrid society. No, none of that. So this is the spy set here. You have a pretty effective scattergun, I'll tell you that right off the bat. You know, it has a decent spread still. It has a nice ability to just hit and chip away at singular targets. You know, it really is just kind of like playing a second Scout, as is so commonly the Highlander sentiment for the Gunspy. Here you have a speed boost, a less HP as well, you know. It's a little bit of a trade-off, a pretty healthy one though. And then you have the Dead Ringer for an additional speed boost, and also just to be an extra big annoyance to really channel the big Scout energy. And then we have the Red Tape Recorder to really complete the trifecta of annoyances here. Now let's get right into the loadout set. So we can see here, you're kind of just dying, right? Just like a Scout. So, it's not the best sign of the potential for this set. Usually you're trying to play a different Scout to be able to circumnavigate issues you're having with the Scout. Unfortunately, they just know how to deal with every type of Scout here. Let's see, I'm getting blasted back by a pirate that can't even see me. Yep. See, here we can see, you're able to disguise as a Scout, both friendly and enemy, and you can just straight up fool people about what class you are. I think that's pretty important, pretty invaluable, if I'm gonna be honest. It's like, oh, It's an actual scout. No, it's just a spy disguised as a scout, but even then, you can disguise as a class other than a scout and have another additional layer of stealth. And that's just so crazy and so invaluable. Now, going in here, we're going to try and go for a speed boost. See, they know there's a spy afoot, they just don't know how to deal with them, you know? It's not actually a spy, it's a scout. What are they gonna do? Here we're gonna annoy the engineer. We're gonna get 1 speed boost, 2 speed boosts, 3 speed boosts, and look at that. Look at that speed. Scout can't match that movement speed. You're just like a scout, what can I say? Now we're gonna try and experiment with the scattergun a little bit, see how effective it is in execution, yeah? Already I can tell you that he has a solid movement speed. That's a pretty good call right there, I'm gonna say. You have a lot of movement options. A lot of it's gonna be horizontal movement granted, but you can kind of just rely on other people to bounce you around. Pretty respectable scattergun, all things considered. It's just not the best versus multi-targets. It doesn't really fulfill the role of a scattergun as well as a scattergun could, you know? It's like, it lacks the shotgun sort of oomph, but if you can hit all your shots, then it's going to be a very good bet. But, I don't know. If you're playing Spy, you're not playing to aim anyways. Yeah. So I'm going to give the Spy a scattergun score of 7 out of 10, I think. It is really hardy, really strong, but it just lacks the punch of the scattergun, you know? You can see I'm shooting people here, but it just doesn't feel the same, you know? I think the issue here is that you're playing Spy. Even if you're trying to play Scout, you're playing Spy. And it's quite unfortunate. Movement speed, though, definitely really good. I'm gonna go with, let's say, a 9 out of 10. You get really high speed boosts from the Dead Ringer, you go really fast from the Big Earner, and then here's another thing to consider. You can rely on enemies to be blasting you around when you're trying to jump as well. If you're on disguise, you know, you can be sent flying by projectiles. So it's like, if a soldier tries to rocket jump you, you'll just go flying. Let me elaborate on my point real quickly, demonstrate rather. See if this stone wants to shoot. Yeah, look at that. That's a solid double jump right there. You can do more of them with your Dead Ringer, but even then, it's still reliant on enemies. I'm gonna have to give it a 5 out of 10. I think this overall puts the Spy in a really good spot, relatively speaking, but I think he lacks the speciality to really excel as a scout, and for that reason, I'm gonna have to give it an 8 out of 10. I hope you've enjoyed my very detailed and insightful analysis into how well the other classes in TF2 can scout, and in a matter of time we'll be moving on to how other classes can soldier. So to conclude here, we can see that the Soldier Scout is definitively the best scout. He has nearly the best scattergun option, he has definitively the best double jump, and his movement potential is just rather unmatched besides by the Dout. But he is much more consistent and sustainable than the Demoman Scout. So, my advice to you, if you play Scout, is to switch to a Rocket Jumper, Shotgun, Disciplinary Action, Soldier, or alternatively to run the Escape plan. For all that out of the way, that will be the end of the video. Thank you for watching and have a good one.